just when you thought Clemson couldn't disappoint more, they disappoint you even more. They are now 1-3 following their 34-21 loss to Syracuse. Syracuse, of all teams, dominated Clemson. And Clemson is now at a point where you don't know just how bad things are about to get for this team. There's not a single game that you can look at on Clemson's schedule and say, yeah, this is a guaranteed win, other than when they played North Carolina. That's it. They were supposed to be a lock to win the ACC. They were supposed to be a surefire thing to be in the college football playoffs. And now, not only is Clemson's season over, they're more than likely not going to make it to the ACC championship. They're going to be unable to backdoor their way into the CFP, which the only way they can do that is if they can somehow find a way to turn around their season. But you're already 0-2 in ACC play, and the season literally just started a month ago. So it looks like Clemson, they could snowball and be even worse than what they already look like right now. This is the most talented 1-3 team that I've ever seen. They have so much talent that when these guys start checking out and looking ahead to the NFL draft and they quit on the team mentally, things are really going to start unraveling for Dabo Swinney and Clemson. And Dabo Swinney, I wonder how he'll take a season like Florida State's if Clemson ends up having that this year, because that's what it seems like things are heading for this squad. They look like this year's Florida State. All the talent that Florida State had heading into 2024 at the start of the first few games for Florida State, you know, when they were losing, you were asking yourself, okay, how many games is Florida State going to lose? Is the team that they losing to that good, or is Florida State just that bad? And eventually, after a month, you got your answer. Florida State was just that bad. And eventually, we're going to start asking ourselves that same question about Clemson until we come to the reality that maybe Clemson is just that bad. They say that you're not always what your record says you are. Well, that's not the case for Clemson. They're a 1-3 team, and they play like a 1-3 team. They're soft up front for the amount of talent that they have on the interior of their defensive line. You can't really tell, because Syracuse was running the ball successfully against that Clemson defense. Georgia Tech was running the football all day long against Clemson's defense. So where's this talented defensive line at? Because I thought Clemson had the best defensive line in college football coming into this season. Doesn't look like it. And while we're on the topic of Clemson's defense, the hiring of Tom Allen is one of the biggest disappointments in college football that nobody's talking about. He was one of the best defensive coordinators in America last year at Penn State. They had a top 10 defense. They were top 10 in everything statistically. They were top 10 against the run, top 10 against the pass, top 10 in points per game allowed, top 10 in yards per game allowed. All of a sudden, he gets to Clemson and forgets how to be a good defensive coordinator. And Clemson's defense is a lot worse under Tom Allen than what it was under the defensive coordinator that Dabo Swinney hired Tom Allen to replace. Cade Klubnik was, to me, the best quarterback in college football coming into this season, at least out of the ones that were returning. Based off how well Cade Klubnik played against Texas, I was convinced that he was the best quarterback in the country. And he had me fooled. And I never was a huge believer in Cade Klubnik, but he somewhat won me over with how well he played in the ACC championship and in that playoff loss against Texas. He was throwing some absolute dots. But he now all of a sudden has reverted back to the Cade Klubnik of old. He's jumping in the pocket. He's skipping passes. He looks like a worse version of Trevor Lawrence when he was at Clemson. And it's not all of Cade Klubnik's fault for why he's struggling. The offensive line has regressed. The way Clemson's offensive line looks, you couldn't tell that they have a good amount of experience on that all line or on that offensive line, when the offensive line was actually supposed to be a strength due to everything that they returned on that unit. And what about Garrett Riley? He's supposed to be one of the best offensive coordinators in college football. And yet, this offense, despite this being, I believe, the third season that he's been with Cade Klubnik, still is struggling. Clemson, for the amount of talent that they have on this team and on this coaching staff, to be 1-3 is a huge shocker. And Clemson definitely looks like they very well are going to be the new Florida State. Florida State had these same issues. They had a lot of talent. They had a good coaching staff, and yet they underperformed. Because before the season, they were viewed to be a lot better than what they actually were. Because once the season actually came around with the way things played out, Florida State was nothing but a paper champ. And that's what Clemson is. Clemson is your 2025 offseason paper champions. Not too many teams received the amount of hype that Clemson got due to the amount of talent that they had. Coaching staff, team. You know, I thought Clemson was going to be able to compete for a national championship. I bought the hype. I'm not going to lie. And I was wrong. Maybe the rest of the ACC has caught up to Clemson. Clemson has dominated this conference for so long because Miami and Florida State have been irrelevant. Now both of these two teams are good. Georgia Tech is good again. There's a lot more stiffer competition in the ACC now than what there was years ago when Clemson was last running roughshod with this conference. And the biggest critique that a lot of folks had about Clemson during their peak under Dabo Swinney was how weak the ACC was. How good do we know Clemson is when they're in the worst conference in college football? Well, now the tables have kind of turned. Clemson looks like to be an above-average team in a conference that still really isn't that good, but at least the teams that have the potential to be elite in the ACC and to be in a national championship discussion, like Miami and Florida State, are now good again. And now that these programs have woken up from their years of hibernation of being bottom dwellers in the ACC, Clemson is now in trouble.